Welcome back to the Business End and our Competitive Advantage series, where we bring business leaders into the arena of elite sport to solve major issues that business face today and use the message of sport to solve them. This isn't to talk nostalgia, but this is to attract systems, behaviors, and decision frameworks that translate into competitive advantage on a Monday morning. Today's guest fits that brief perfectly. Hugh Curley is a senior commercial leader with more than 20 years in global financing solution, structured deals, international partnerships, and commercial growth strategy. He's worked across Mitsubishi, GE Capital, Barclays, and now leads Curley Capital Associates, helping business scale, refinance, and expand into new markets. This is competitive advantage from sport, and today we're looking at the biggest challenges companies face. Welcome to the show, Hugh, and welcome to your first podcast, by the way.
Thanks, guys. Cheers. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Hugh.
No problem.
Let's crack on and get into it. So, Hugh, often in business, a universal issue can be that strategy execution gap. Too many priorities, too much noise, slow delivery, basically a failure to execute plans. Where do you see sport providing guidance on this?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, and the overlap is, very, very real. I think in business, things get really overly complicated. I think the key thing is really just keeping things really, really simple. Everybody knowing the game plan, everybody being on message, and relentlessly working towards that. A 40-page playbook, doesn't work. All these pitches, all that kind of stuff needs to be nice and simple. And then people knowing what the roles are, and taking some action and ownership and getting on with it. And a cycle of review as well. I think from sports on a Monday morning review, constant short loops of reviews of where you are against that plan can really help to keep people focused, stop people going off on various tangents. Just simplifying things, keep things really simple, regular review, and everybody being on the same page, knowing the plan and sticking to it.
Very good.
So basically for you, it's like clarity and simplicity in the message.
100%. When you're playing sports, whether it's rugby, whatever it is, everybody needs to know what the role is, what the plan is. You don't have 10 or 15 plans. It's like, okay, we're going to attack the channels. We're going to, ruck really, really as hard as we can. We're going to get the ball wide. It's those kind of three things. Everything that sits under that, everybody does. Everybody needs to tackle. Everyone needs to be aware of their positioning and everything. It's the same in business. You got to keep those things, bite-sized. So the overall goal is known by everybody. Everybody's roles within that are known. And then you take action and deliver that. And then there'll be, you need to tweak things, change things slightly. But it's these three things that we need to focus on: a laser focus for the customer, simplifying processes, whatever they may be, depending on the business, is what you focus on in a framework and in a timeline, 30, 60, 90 days that you work towards and you achieve it. And then with those regular reviews, you can tick off where you're against plan.
And do you have any weekly actions that you take to deliver strategy so they don't get lost after 60 minutes?
Just that regular review every morning, looking at whatever projects we're undertaking, where we are against plan, but also that regular review with the SLT, with the project leaders, with the owners of whatever initiatives or projects that you're working on. But I think even before that, it's agreeing that plan. What is the plan? And retrospectively working back occasionally, what do we need to do to get there? So this is where we want to be. We want to be there in 12 months. What do we need to do to get there? Is everybody on board with this plan? An element of common sense as well. Why are we going there? Or why are we doing this? Or why aren't we doing this? Why are we doing it the way that we're doing it now? Is it just because that's the way we've always done it? And by changing that, will it help us get to where we need to be? So it's a regular kind of revolving review process that changes, and you got to be able to adapt and pivot and be agile. I think in those processes, the world is changing so fast. Whether it's from tech, I think you've got some questions about that a little bit later. Culture, people, people's expectations of the workplace itself, and how we work as a as a as a as a business community now. All those kind of things need to be factored into it. But it's very easy for there to be lots of noise and procrastination around what needs to be done. So just get on with it, crack on with it. It doesn't need to be perfect now. Just start it, make it perfect later. And then suddenly the white empty page gets something on it, and you start working towards it. So that kind of procrastination analysis kind of lock that people get themselves into. Where do I start? Look at where you want to go, work it back, bite-sized chunks, what you need to do in order to get there, and now let's go and do it.
Just in terms of your core message and your plan, how do you communicate that to your team and get buy-in and understanding? How do you approach that?
That's a really good question, because the plan, although the outcome is maybe one thing from a business perspective, but what that means to different people can be very, very different. So a lot of the roles I've had throughout my career, when I look back on it, there were leadership roles, maybe in matrix environments. So you don't have the luxury of somebody not getting a good mark in their career appraisal just because they're a direct report. I didn't have that luxury for some. To me, I just preferred leading and being a leader and working that way. But what that means is you need to understand what the G&Os and benefits are for the other people that need to contribute to the plan to deliver the outcome. People in operations, to people in risk, to people in finance, to compliance, to sales, all of very different drivers as to why you could encourage them or get them to come along on the journey. So you need to speak to them individually, or certainly at the organizational level or functional level, to show them their piece of the plan, how important it is, and then to motivate them by talking their language, and how all those different cogs, feed into the wheel and get everybody to where they need to be in the end. So very often as well, there would be conflict or adversarial elements with functions, maybe sales and risk or pricing, and that you kind of need to just show everybody, without these guys, you don't get to do what you do. So without operations, customer service, you don't get to deliver your first class customer service, your amazing customer journey, the approval rates that you have. So you all need to work together and help each other. We're all interdependent of the customer's outcome, and that can be forgotten a lot of the time. There needs to be an absolute laser focus on the customer and what the customer wants. Not what we're telling them they want, but what they actually want. Often I've been involved in, projects are coming up with a new product or a new route to market, where the customer hasn't even been asked. Is this something that they'll use? It's like, no, we'll just crack on. We'll, mobilize a huge project team, cross-functional, cross-jurisdictional, and we'll come up with this wonderful product and then wonder why nobody bloody wants to buy it. It's because it wasn't needed in the first place. So that's something I learned fairly early in my career. Canvass your customers, go and ask them, how can we help? If we were to do this, would it be helpful? Would you buy it? Would it be of value? That's the key thing. Is it going to be of value to you before we kind of determine what our strategy is or how to execute upon it?
Very good.
So quick question. Obviously, you're working with clients, stakeholders, clients, and to deliver projects, you need their cooperation on timelines. And I find this a problem. They're often, I don't know if this has crept into business, but they're often slow to respond and don't move to your time frame. How do you bring clients along with you to get things done and things don't get stuck?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that even in a role where you're managing a project, you need to have sponsors. So there needs to be a clear priority of what you're doing is a priority for them and for the business. So once you've kind of identified sponsors, culture is a big part of it as well, I think. You need people who are going to champion the initiative, champion you, and you're not seen as an outsider. So you try to integrate yourself as much as possible. And you enable the group to do it. So we don't have an army of consultants or anybody coming in, you're looking at the strategy, looking at the people, looking at the leadership groups, and you're trying to, depending on what the challenge is, normally there's many challenges, never just kind of one, and they tend to be interrelated. That you, first of all, people can see the benefit of doing what you're doing, what the project is, or what the initiative is, what the change is, getting buy-in, as I mentioned earlier, that everybody can see how they will benefit and what they contribute to it. Outcomes and your contribution to an outcome is really important for people in terms of self-esteem, motivation, loyalty. But in terms of a business's ability to develop their people, they need to be given new experiences. They need to be able to develop. On the training ground, we do it all the time in sports. And it doesn't really matter so much if you mess up. That's what training ground is there for. But you need to practice. It's the reps. You need to repeat it. You need to get better and better at it. Creating depth. You play out a position. So in the business environment, that is equally important. The opportunity to do a number of projects and initiatives through my career that, you could work your whole career in that lane, in that function, and never be able to get to do them. Some of them were thrust upon me. Maybe with a little bit of resistance or just apprehension more so. And others I grabbed with both hands and said, I want to be involved in that. That sounds brilliant. I'm going to go after that. And they're the kind of additional projects, that's outside of your lane. It's outside of your pay profile. It's outside of your bonus, whatever it is. But you're going to enjoy it. You're going to contribute and you're going to get recognition, but you're going to develop as a person. And be able to then start a business like Curley Capital Associates. It's because I've had the career that I've had and touched so many different things that kind of adds a lot of value to what we can bring to organizations.
Yeah, I'd kind of liken clients to like they're part of the team, aren't they? So if you're looking, and the only way that you can bring the team on, they could be like, they could be background staff or back-end staff or whatever. But the only way that you can bring a team on is by winning their trust. And the only way that you can win the trust of people is by basically getting to know them and then getting to know you. And the chances are then that you can have conversations with clients and say to them, look, could we pick the pace up a bit or drop it off, so to speak. And there's more, if there's that understanding, there's more of a mutual respect and it's not a them and us scenario. I think you've got to get the clients to buy in. And sometimes I think, you've got to use intuition to spot the clients. You could spot the clients that might be a bit difficult and then decide what you're going to do.
There's an element to that as well. Yeah. Client. It's a very, it becomes a very personal thing. Business is a people thing. Commercial, my focus has been on commercial aspects, commercial growth, whether it's new business, relationship management, sales, marketing, those aspects. Things really kick on when you have a real appreciation for the other functions, different cultures, around Europe or internationally.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're all clients. You're always selling. Everybody's always selling, whether they know it or not. And you got to bring people along with you. And you got to show them where the value in that is. But from, an external client perspective, it is important that you work with the right clients, and you do that as well through regular review. So it's not just a formal monthly meeting or bi-weekly meeting. It's regular, short feedback on loops and review, and things like that get uncovered, and you come across those things very, very quickly. But it also gives you the opportunity to say, okay, you're firefighting right now. This has come up. That's going to impact our deliverables in this way by this. So if you pull resource off this now, this is what's going to happen. This is the net effect. This is the follow on. This is the ripple effect. You throw that stone into the pond and there's the ripple effect. So do you really want to throw that stone? Do you really want to do it? Or do we double down and just get this nailed? Because, a month ago or 6 months ago, this was a huge priority for the business. We've covered a lot of ground, but we're still not there yet.
Yeah, I think that's something sport gets right as well, because it invests a lot in personal relationships. And that's something business is more transactional, I understand it, but investing in not only knowing your staff, knowing your leaders, knowing the team around you, but investing in the people that supply services to you and also your clients as well is so important. But moving on to the next challenge that we see in business, which is an overloaded work leadership capacity. Modern leaders pretty much overwhelmed far more responsibility than capability. You know, elite sports seems to have solved this by creating small leadership groups rather than like an heroic captain or an heroic CEO. So how do you use shared leadership and clarity inside your teams?
Yeah, so you just nailed it. You've nailed it
I'm
there.
sorry.
You've asked my question for me.
All right, okay. I'm not letting you off though.
No, but that's it. The small leadership groups.
Yeah.
Enabling and empowering people. And this comes back into the development piece I talked about earlier and the heroic captains. You're right. There's been a big shift in sports. And there needs to be the same in business as well. So yeah, you can have a captain if you want as a project leader, project sponsor. And then within that, you need strands of whatever work streams that are happening and leaders for each. Or maybe there's not even a work stream, but it's a customer journey, or it can be soft. It can be soft as well as hard tasks. But the net effect of that is, there's clear ownership and accountability within a wider group structure. But people are developing. They've been given the opportunity to be recognized, to stand up, to lead things in a safe environment, like the training ground situation where people can make mistakes and work on developing that and understand why they've made the mistake. In a business environment, it's much more difficult to do that because, well, it's not much more difficult to do that. I think leaders find it more difficult to enable people to be able to make mistakes. So there's a difference. And I'm not saying you take a young graduate or apprentice and put them, a mechanic working on an F1 car. No, there's growth that needs to happen, and you need to identify at what stage that person is growing. But the heroic captains, when you look around in your business, there could be lots of them already in the business staring you square in the face. It doesn't mean you need to go out and hire the best CFO or the best operations officer or sales director. But growing people and developing people internally, and part of that can be as a leadership, having leadership groups where they get to own certain aspects of that they're comfortable in, but there's a stretch, right? There's always a stretch in it for them. Whereas people don't develop, they don't learn. Anytime I've ever taken on a job or indeed an assignment or an activity or whatever, you always kind of look at the stretch. What's in it for me? And that's not being selfish. That's, why would you take on a job that you already know how to do everything? Well, what's the point in that? Why would you leave your previous job? Maybe it's about money, but that, that in terms of fulfillment and development, it's not going to get you to where you want to be. That's an aspect I think business can do better from and learn from sports massively. And then, as people develop more and grow more, again, it comes down to motivation, self-esteem. But you see that from a leadership perspective, you can relinquish some of this stress, some of this firefighting, trust in your team, trust in your group. A CEO can't do everything. They shouldn't be expected to do everything. So you got to lean on your leaders to do that. And your leaders, as part of their own development, is them developing their teams where people can step up in sub-projects as leadership or more senior leadership roles as well. But group leadership, those little groups, I think are a fantastic way of achieving that and empowering people and reducing the workload, I think.
Yeah, and then aligning them all to move in the same direction, so it becomes a superpower, basically. So they're all aligned.
This is it. Yeah. Once everyone's agreed on where you're going, to some extent, you have to let people get there in their own way. So you kind of keep it between the ditches, You got your road, you got to keep it moving in the right direction, but keep it between the ditches. And if you want to meander a little bit within those ditches, go for it. That's fine, as long as everybody's moving in the right direction.
And I think you really touched upon a core element of that in the last question. You're building trust, getting to know the individuals, them getting to know you within the team, and then as you said, enabling the team members to have those stretch goals and tasks so they can grow into that leadership role. And I think that's really, really important. It can start very small, but in doing so, you're growing out that ability. You're getting that buy-in, you're getting that fulfillment from the role, and therefore you're getting a better collective product, I would say.
Absolutely. And you get the opportunity to observe as well and review and refine and repeat. Okay, that person actually did really, really well on that task. I didn't think that was in his, in his wheelhouse at all. Actually, we need people. I want to see if he'd be interested in jumping to a role that we've got over here that he could really excel in. So mobility around the business is really important as well. And that comes back to what we were saying from a sports team. You try and build depth and you look at playing people in different functions. I mean, you got Bundyaki packing down at flanker now when needs be. But it's the same in business. People are agile. Often they want to do something new. Even if they don't want to take on a new role in a different function, being invited into a smaller leadership group can be a brilliant way of keeping people fresh, interested, and knowing that they're contributing. But from a senior level, you get to observe and review your workforce and be able to deploy them as and when you need, particularly if you're in an agile business that needs to pivot occasionally and you need to pull resource around to make it work.
Well, and I think that's a huge point. I mean, if you don't give someone the opportunity to grow, to develop, then you're never going to know those things. If it's always you say they do, then you're never going to get the best out of them or the buy-in. So I think that's a really, really important point. And it's say something natural we do in sport. We're always looking to expand that that skills, the technical understanding, their IQ of the game, and we do that on the training ground little by little.
And you know what these people do? They leave. They go. In a rugby team, in a football team, it's a big decision to leave your team.
Yeah.
And it's because of what you've just mentioned. They get the opportunity to do all these things in training. In business, someone's gone before they even mention any of this kind of stuff. They don't want to necessarily, if the environment hasn't been created where they're comfortable in doing this, or sticking their hand up saying, I'm getting a bit bored of what I'm doing, can I do something else, or can I go for a role over here, where they think that would be seen as a negative, and maybe in occasions it would be. But they vote with their feet and they leave. Yeah. And then, there's all the silliness of, I would give you more money, what are they giving you, all this kind of stuff. And the employee's checked out at that point. The relationship is broken down and you've undermined the trust. So,
sure.
They say something like counter offers. If anyone gets a counter offer, something like 95% of people, if they accept the counter offer, leave their employer within 6 to 12 months.
Yeah,
that high.
Because the trust is broken, both sides.
Yeah. And that segues nicely onto our next question, talent retention. So in rugby, as we know, we don't exclusively rely on buying talent in. Pathways are built, talents developed to create that depth, as we've spoken about. Businesses today face real skills shortages, including talent acquisition and retention. How do you feel companies can build? And I think we've touched upon that, but if we can expand upon it, it'd be great. How do you feel companies can build capability instead of buying their way out of problems?
Yeah, this is good. A lot of pressures on workforce. A lot of talk about this in the media. So you're right. We did touch on it in terms of giving people opportunities, being open to them being mobile within a business, and just I think continual improvement and the opportunity for people to train and develop. So when I was at GE Capital, I mean, they were just absolutely first class at leadership development and just employee development. They had a whole university campus at Crotonville that was specifically dedicated to this. And they were just thought leaders, the amount of leaders that were produced, and you got to work with some real A players. But that filtered right the way down to, people coming new into the business, people just starting their careers. Not every company can set up their own kind of campus and leadership university. But there's so many resources out there that can be tapped into, whether it's free or whether you have people come in and help, and just afford people, or even make it mandatory, not so much mandatory, but really push people to show some continued development. And we touched on working on different projects and initiatives. That can be online learning, it can be accreditations, professional qualifications, it can be secondments. In a previous role, kind of worked to my detriment if I look at my own team, but it was actually the net effect and the net impact was exactly what we were going for. There was a guy working in my team, and he was kind of like an internal sales support guy. And he was getting bored, and you could see that. And he was, he had so much more development and scope to grow into, that in the role that he was in, I couldn't give that to him because it was quite a defined role. So we seconded him over to another part of the business in a sales role, and quickly developed him over 2 or 3 months into client facing, doing meetings, effective questioning, objection handling, all of those kind of things, but just a greater peripheral view as well of the business and a different part of the business and how it impacted. So the bit for me that could have gone a little bit better was that he never came back. The manager hired him as a permanent hire after his secondment. So I had to go out and hire somebody else that I could bring into the role. But it actually worked out much better because I was able to hire a person that had a stretch within that role for them. And we got them into the team, and he enjoyed a very successful, ongoing career in the role that he had grown into. But that's about, looking at your team, deploying them in the best way for the business and for them. And, he was a guy who probably would have been looking around the job market, I suspect, because he was just getting so bored. But he's a good guy. We managed to keep him in the business, and I'm sure he'll have many more happy years there.
It's very apparent and a real bit of gold there, I think, for any leader out there, doing the right thing. And the right thing at that point, even if it may have caused a little bit of disruption for you and your team, was doing the right thing for that team member. You identified that he was a little bit bored, that he wasn't stretched, so you gave him an opportunity to fulfill his potential in another part of the company. And okay, that did a little bit of disruption from your end, but I'm sure that was very much noticed and appreciated, not just by him, but by also the other team members that understood that you had their back in that moment and that you would do the right thing for them.
Absolutely. And I kind of go back to where the leadership piece, it's not about someone doing something because they're a direct report. It's this, they can see. And then you build trust and you build credibility, and then people will go to war for you. They will go to battle for you. They won't question some radical transformation because they'll know that you wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't right for the business and right for them as a group.
Agreed.
And he had a career path. I was creating a career path for him. He was going to come back and he was going to be promoted into a client-facing role. But the thing that happened was the career path was still created. Just because he didn't come back, it was still there. There was a clear career path for us to take junior members of staff and really kind of develop them and grow them into more senior roles. And there's a career path there. And that can be a tricky thing to do in smaller businesses, but it's absolutely possible. In fact, that was the reasonably small team. So that's what we did there.
So there's two things, I think, from what you said, where I think that business can learn from sport. One of them you just said is about leadership. Rather than a lot of them just dive straight into directions and very directive and say, do this, do that, without actually having built the trust in the first place and getting to know the staff. That's a big thing. The second thing I think that sport does really well that business doesn't do when it comes to talent acquisition, sport will look at people a lot more on personality, and they're only hire people to their teams who they think are going to add value, whereas businesses will hire on skills. I have this conversation a lot, and feedback, like they're not quite experienced enough, but they've got all the DNA to be a superstar. And you're like, what are you talking about? They could learn that in a week. Sport does that well. And then when it comes to retention of talent, because like the trust is there, because like generally sports coaches or leaders are not directive anymore, and as you say, team people willing to go to war, talent retention becomes easier because you can have honest conversations and people can hold up their hand and say, I'm bored shitless doing this, can you move me? And also by doing the right thing as a leader, coincidentally you save your business a lot of money, because if that person left you'd have to replace them and you'd have to hire them and all the hiring costs that are involved. But I mean, I'll come on to the technology, in one of the last questions about this when it comes to all these things, talent retention and acquisition. But it's very good points that you've raised there. So in terms of, this is one question that everyone has a conundrum with. in sports teams, you have like cultural leaders, people that like call the shots, like they dictate standards. You know, they say you gotta run faster, you gotta move harder, and all this. In business, if you have those sort of people, they tend to be frowned upon. Those people that raise the standards, they're seen as perhaps social climbers within the business. But what do you think the business can take from sport when it comes to cultural and resistance change? You know, what can you see from sport?
That's a good one. It's a tricky one. I say tricky because normally in sports, less so in elite professional sport, but where every normal person is working in a job in an office, you know, they're not an elite sports person, but they have played sports, they're playing sports. So this kind of subtle difference is the emotional intensity or kind of sport being quite highly charged. You know, professionals are able to switch off, you know, they've got to do their job. You know, some would call them machines nowadays and things like that. But kind of if you move down a couple of rungs down the ladder, they're the kind of guys that you're talking about who are, you know, bit of bravado, you know, life is all the party, but they're not always the kind of cultural leaders as well either. It's sometimes the guys who go about their business quite quietly. They're the ones who are first into training, first, you know, last to leave, but not just sitting there waiting around. They're getting in earlier, practicing their kicking, or scrum halves practicing their passing, or, you know, working on moves, some back moves, speaking to coaches. What did you think about this? What did you think about that? In business, when I would need to implement something in a sales team, for example, if we look at one of the, you know, a product, sales aid finance. So it's an alternative to cash payment, paying in cash. You get to pay over time, leasing or structured finance, whatever it may be. So you would go into a sales team and you try and educate them on the benefits of this for their customer. You know, they get to pay over time. They can spend more money because they've got a bigger budget, you know, X, Y, Z. But for them to implement that change in their sales pattern, in their sales behaviors, in their strategy, they're very reluctant to do it. They don't believe they know enough about the product. It's finance, it's complicated. A third party is going to come in and mess up his sale, all of this kind of stuff. Some of it pretty legitimate, but you just need to be taken on a journey. You need to build trust. And the way that I used to always do that was to look in that sales team or that team and who were their cultural carriers, who were their top performers. Because 9 times out of 10, the top performers will use any bit of leverage, any new tool that can make them better and help them sell more, or help them do their job better, or help them deliver more value to their customers, and just really kind of are laser focused on the customer. So when you can adopt those guys and get those people as champions to use your product or your service that you're trying to implement as a sales aid tool for that team, that resonates really quite powerfully with the existing team that are there. So like, you know, look at Michelle, you know, she's nailing it again. Oh, and she's done like this new finance thing. 4 of her 5 customers have done it this month so far. I got to get a piece of that. Well, I should be using that. And then they'll go and speak to them. So in the business world, there are these cultural carriers. You know, they'll be found in different places for projects and things like that. You know, you can see in functions who cultural carriers are, who are displaying the outcomes, the desired outcomes that we want everybody to have. And it can be done overtly. Here's Tom, he's doing X, Y, Z. This is what we want everybody to be like. Sometimes that doesn't work. Resentment can be built. He can be undermined. He might not be comfortable being put in the spotlight, or you can just more subtly. But it's something to be encouraged. Cultural carriers, as long as they're carrying the right kind of culture, and it's how you try and promote that. And look, it's a natural thing as well, isn't it? I'm not sure that it can be really taught to be a cultural leader, to really kind of naturally display these kind of things. You know, everybody can buy into the culture and be a believer and go in that direction and display those kind of behaviors. Absolutely. But the leaders that you want to be able to kind of lean on, you know, within the tapestry of the business, you know, they're there. They are there. So it's about just identifying them and trying to include them in a way that is beneficial for all, really.
Yeah, they say leaders are the first followers, and those are the people you're probably referring to there. They set the standards. because they're following what to do and think, how do we make this better?
This is it. I remember, I was never tall at any sport I've ever done, apart from boxing. I used to fight little chubby chaps, and I was a little bit taller. But I'm by no stretch a tall person at all. So Gaelic football, hurling, rugby, always the smallest guy on the pitch. But in rugby, my favorite part of the game was tackling. I just loved tackling. I just loved knocking big guys down, and that's about technique and timing and bit of bravery. Probably put my head in a few places I probably shouldn't have over the years. I would go and seek out people and ask their advice and learn from people you observe that are leaders in that or good in that or whatever. So that I knew I was doing something right when I played a lot of my rugby at scrum half. I was one of the lippy gobby ones. I'm sure you won't believe that, but
we'll say nothing.
It's been said I was nicer to play with than play against, so that's the ultimate compliment, I think. But the litmus test was, a big flanker, number 8, would come running at you, and you tackle him and put him down. The next time he came running at you, that he'd offload the ball before you met him with a tackle. That was my litmus test. So I think you're right. We do learn from people and leaders in a sports sense. I think absolutely we can do that in the business world as well. Just need to look for it, I think, a little bit differently.
So you've mentioned culture a few times, and it's often happens quite naturally in sport. When you're building your business, how do you approach that cultural element for your team? Embed it, allow those good behaviours that you're wanting to identify and build on, embed themselves within your group.
Yeah, great question. I think for me, it's a little bit different. So I don't really have, a big team. I like to leverage my network and associates and things like that. So I've always been a bit of a chameleon, and that is because the nature of the roles that I've done and the businesses that I've worked in as my career kind of progressed, kind of called for that. So you needed to be able to speak to a risk leader with your risk hat on, commercial guys with a commercial hat on, compliance and finance with your compliance and those hats on. And then layer on top of that, the actual country cultural differences, stretching from Northern Europe, then you've got the big four, and then, Southern Europe, very, very different dynamics. And then you layer on, the US onto that, who kind of just don't really get that kind of cultural dynamicism, particularly in Europe. I mean, we have an incredible tapestry of different cultures and languages and everything in Europe. It's absolutely fantastic. And the appreciation for that from across the pond isn't always there. So yeah, I've had to pay attention to cultural differences quite a lot over my career, and functional differences. So now in the Curley Capital, I still do that, but also always just being very professional and friendly and real. I think just trying to be real, and I kind of find it difficult not to get on with people, which is a good thing. So I think just keeping business real, being really professional and sympathetic to the company, what they're trying to achieve, and that no company is perfect. Everybody's kind of trying to do the best for themselves, for their businesses, their stakeholders, their shareholders, whoever your drivers are. Yeah. So that's how I tend to approach it. I kind of just leverage what I've learned, my experience in my career, look at who I'm dealing with, be professional, honest, real, and try to adapt as much as I can to what their philosophy is.
Very good. Moving on, productivity, tech, and AI disruption. So McKinsey calls this productivity imperative, doing more with less, adapting tech faster. Sport often treats innovation like a new fad, an attacking pattern. Test it, refine it, then integrate it. How do you help companies adopt new tools or financial systems without overwhelming people?
Yeah, that's a good one, because with financial changes, they tend to happen at quite a senior level, and there's an awful lot of risk associated with them, depending on what you're trying to do. So, I touched on the individual salesperson introducing, sales aid financing, a financing option to help them sell more product. It's not debatable as to whether it helps or not, but you still have these debates with people. It's, um, you kind of just need to take it back to the real world. Like you buying a car, not a lot of people have, 30 grand or whatever just to pay for their new car. They tend, more often than not to finance it. Your mortgage,
Mhm.
that's the financing to help you acquire your mobile phone, whatever it may be. It's not a new concept. For some reason, introducing these things into the business world is, you know, is scary for some. In a business I worked in, where we were purchasing invoices, providing working capital solutions. So we were buying invoices, allowing that customer to pay us back later. So extending the window for them to make payment. And we were paying the manufacturer on the original due date. So they got their money when they needed to. That was being done on an Excel spreadsheet, which is kind of okay, for the company I was doing it for. But for the client, I mean, that's just archaic kind of stuff. They would need to call up and say, well, that invoice that you extended for me, when do I need to pay you back for that? They didn't have a notification. They didn't have
Mhm.
any way of, in their systems, unless they were tracking it manually themselves, as to when they would need to pay it back. And for a finance company, you think to yourself, what? You know, you're not even tracking your payments. If you don't get paid, you don't make any money. That's the risk and reward bit,
Yeah.
right? So a reasonably simple fix. We kind of introduced digitalization of the documentation, automatically generated agreement numbers, payment dates, and schedules that were exchanged with the clients and that were managed internally. Um, so there can be a whole raft of changes in digitalization. I mean, everybody's gone crazy with AI and, it's going to take over the world and and it is great. AI is brilliant for productivity, for freeing up time hours and things like this. But it's not going to, you're still going to have a customer. You're still going to have someone who's providing value for that customer. And there's lots of tools and things, depending on where you are in the original scale, that can help you be more productive. And just, digitalize things like the example that I gave, that was a big game changer. Was it AI? No, it wasn't AI, but it was just some tech that was introduced.
Mhm.
And step by step, I'm not a big fan of these big, tech, changes and launches and new systems and, a big launch and these kind of things. It's just a recipe for disaster. It's just too complicated, too complex. And when you introduce complexity, there's just more stuff that can go wrong. Right? So it's
Yeah.
kind of baby steps, just bite-sized chunks, bit by bit. Look at what you want to do, what you need to fix, where you're going with it, how you fix it, map it over, 60, 90 days, just a couple of things. So it is that. It's that, identify, refine it, repeat it, review it, and tweak it. And pilots, I'm a big fan of pilots. So we would pilot a promotion, a marketing activity, or a pricing initiative, or a new product, whatever it may be, in a country that is representative of as many other countries where you intend to launch that as possible, and just go and test it there, go and do it there, learn from it, see what needs to be tweaked or refined, or if you can just roll it out. And then you've got, some reference points, you've got data points to speak to your partner if you're working with a partner and doing it on their behalf. Look, here are the results. This is what happened. We increased sales by this, profitability by this, whatever it might be. Customer feedback was X, Y, and Z. It's been received really well. Oh, and look what the competitors just started doing. Funny that. Yeah, big fan of pilots, testing, refining, repeating, and launching. I mentioned earlier about the voice of the customer, asking the customers these kind of things, what would help, because what we think some of these tools that might drive productivity are and can help with might just be fluffy stuff that isn't really needed. And will people actually adopt it? We talked about change and, people have enough tools and systems. I've been in businesses where I've had 5 different logons and had to work across 3 different systems to get a customer name, their risk rating, to see what their outstandings were, to look at their credit lines, to see what available headroom there was. That in itself takes you 15, 20 minutes to do. And then
Yeah.
guess what? You've got your logins refreshing and timing out, lost your password, need to call IT. Can you reset my password? It's just, so there's a lot of efficiencies and simplification that can be done that is really productive, that will be really productive for people and helpful. but it's in addition to, it's not a replacement for in many cases. So yeah, that's how I would kind of maybe think about it.
I think one of the biggest challenges business face at the moment is how they integrate AI into their work systems and how they regulate it. So, for example, if you've got like 100 odd employees and they're all on Chat GPT and things like that, is how they regulate that and how they enforce it and what systems they use, because some of them aren't as safe as others. I mean, I see it, like instances of responses on Chat GPT which are not appropriate, and business really has to look about how they're going to use it, because there's no doubt that AI will enhance their product if used correctly, but it's how they manage that, and that's an issue, I think.
I don't know, haven't implemented any systems officially into the business, but I do use ChatGPT. There's Copilot and Gemini, isn't there, in Word and Microsoft. There's a couple of other platforms that I'm kind of going to start looking into a little bit more. But in terms of saving me time, in terms of researching, brainstorming, I find it very helpful. So, when you are a McKinsey or whoever, you've got armies of people to do lots of research and all these kind of things for you. The aspects I use it for are hugely time saving for me. Like, winning days back in the week occasionally. In terms of, if we're looking at, equity raises, it can be quite interesting to look at the market, whether, depending on what different stage a company is at or what the sentiment is in the lending community, as to whether that's flavor of the month anymore, or not. It can save a lot of time. But
Actually,
as you said, just
sorry.
on the integrity of the data, you need to still be really, really, fastidious and obsessive about making sure what's produced is genuine,
Correct,
is credible, is correct, and that you would share. You can't just copy paste things and drop them in. You need to look into the sources. You need to, read it through. Does it make sense? Question it. But from purely a time saving perspective, that's definitely improved our productivity.
Yeah, and definitely, I agree. We're using it in recruitment and not in the ways that people expect it to be used. It saves time, but increases accuracy of what you produce, which actually then creates more work. And I've listened to someone speak about AI the other day, and they're an expert in it, and they said, if you go at the end of the day, if you've go home and said, that was easy, and then you're not using AI right, you should go home feeling absolutely exhausted because it keeps challenging you, giving you something else. I'm kind of finding that a bit at the moment. So anyway, moving on, we're wrapping this up now. It's been great speaking with you. So, we discussed like the 5 challenges that we think companies face the most often. From your side, which of these 5 challenges do you see the most often in business? What do you think the biggest problem is?
So, I don't think, they come in isolation. I think the challenges, you've touched on like really, really relevant challenges in business today. And I think they're interdependent. If the culture is not right, if management are overloaded, or if, even take one step back, if you haven't got your strategy and your plan to execute right, senior managers are going to be firefighting all the time. So I think they're all interrelated. So what we try and do, if we're coming in on a kind of consultative basis like that, will be to look at what's the game plan. What is the real plan? Have you got the tools to do it? Is the leadership structure correct? And then from a capital perspective, are there levers that we can pull to either accelerate capital? If you've got 3-year contracts with renewing income, can we accelerate all 3 years into day one? And what would you be able to do with that money to redeploy it into a sales initiative, maybe hire more staff, marketing, or go out and buy a competitor and expand that way? So there's lots of different things, but I think it all comes back to what's the plan? Everybody get on the same page on the plan, know their roles, leadership groups to free up time, empower and enable everybody, and to start moving, as we said, kind of meandering if necessary, but keeping it between the ditches and everybody going in the same direction.
Yeah, it's all about people, isn't it? People management, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, those aspects, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you can look at your Gantt charts and your process flows and those kind of things, but you don't want everything to be, in one person's head. So the more you can give people experiences across different functions and across different roles, the more people are bought into that and the better a chance they have to develop themselves. But also, I guess, from a leadership perspective, you kind of protect yourself from inevitably when people move on or they move out of that role, that you've still got experience to come in and continue that role without a net negative impact to the customer or to the function or the overall delivery of the strategy and the goal.
So if a CEO was listening today and recognises some of these challenges that we've spoken about but still feels stuck, what's the first sport-inspired move they should make on a Monday morning, do you think?
So yeah, simplicity, clarity over complexity. Yeah, every day. That comes back to everybody knowing what the plan is, what the goals are, and what their role within that is. And not a big 50-page pitch. Really simple. Everybody knows what it is. If they can't repeat it back to you in 20, 30 seconds, then you need to go back and redraft your plan. Keeping that really, really simple. Leaders as well, that leadership group piece we talked about, really, really valuable. Because leaders are made and developed. No one's born a leader.
Mm-hmm.
You get to experience it and you build on it. And that should be encouraged. We've loads and loads of leaders and heroic captains amongst our workforces, and they just need to be given the opportunity to develop them. I think the third thing, I mentioned it a few times, is that reviewing, just short feedback loop. Reviewing every Monday. This is what I would say to a CEO if they're firefighting at the moment. Monday morning, grab your senior leadership team, pull them into a room for an hour. No slides, no pitches, and 3 questions. What's working well? Okay. Double down on it. Make it even better. Carry on. Just double down. Crack on with it. Question number 2, what's not working? And, no messing around, just facts. No blaming, no excuses. Just what's not working. List it down, identify it, nail it. And then the third one is, what are we going to do about the 2 previous answers in the next 90 days? What's going to be our actionable commitment in the next 90 days to, doubling down on what we're doing good and fixing or eliminating what's not working. That's what I would be suggesting.
That's a bit of gold. And I think it goes back to a story we heard on with one of our other guests, and he was saying about someone was asking for feedback about the halftime talk as a coach to the players, and saying, I noticed you wrote down your questions, or the points you were going to make. Why did you do that? Well, so I could remember what I was going to say. And and it's like, so if you need to write it down to remember it, do you think your players are going to remember all of that detail in the 10-minute spell or 15-minute spell at half time? And it's like, well, that's a really good point. And you just summed it up there. 3 questions, right? Or 3 points, because, we can all absorb that. And if we can absorb it, we're more likely to action it. Whereas when we spread it too wide and too deep and too thick, not everyone's getting those salient points. So that's great stuff, Hugh.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
also on that, Hugh, I'd say on that meeting, you dive straight into it first thing on a Monday morning, like a cold plunge pool to get it out of the way. It's the first way to get your working week started. Yeah.
Tying back to the sports world, Fitz, you come in after your match at the weekend and you're sitting down, you're doing a review, you're doing an analysis on a Monday morning, video review of everything, what went, the good, the bad, the nasty, the whole lot, nowhere to hide. And that's just the mode. That's the mindset that elite sports people are in.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely that can be transitioned into business. And that's the form it takes. It takes every Monday morning, a review what's happened in the previous week, or the 2-3 key projects. So like from next Monday, we'll have identified point 1, point 2, and we've got our action plan as to the 90 days. So the next Monday meeting is how we're performing against that plan. What's working, what's not working, and it's iterative, and you keep going from there and there and there. But yeah, 100% that's transferable from sports. So they're the things that I would say, simplicity, getting everybody on the same plan, those leadership groups to take the burden away and empower people to help you get to plan, and that regular review of being able to adapt and refine, rinse, repeat. Yeah, to help everybody stay between the ditches.
Well, Hugh, this was absolute pleasure speaking to you today. There's so much gold there, and as we've discussed, the biggest business problems aren't new. Sport and often solved them decades ago. It's the discipline in how you apply them that creates that competitive advantage. This has been the competitive advantage from sport on the business end. Hugh Curley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Hugh.